Well, the federal election is in high gear, and so is the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our 2015 federal candidate interviews with those individuals seeking to be a member of Parliament for either Cambridge or the new federal riding of Kitchener South Hespeler. And here in the Chamber studio today is my friend from Kitchener South Hespeler riding, Marion Gagne. How are you?
Excellent. How are you doing today, Greg?
I'm wonderful. I hear you were out in 40-degree weather yesterday.
I was still suffering a little bit of the after effect, so, but let's get to it. I'm here, ready to talk.
At least it wasn't pouring down rain at the same time.
You know what? In the middle of winter, we're going to be talking about how we wish we were back in the 40-degree weather. So, that's
funny?
Just Canadian.
Why do we do that, though? It's the first. I can remember the first day where we had high heat and humidity back in the early summer. And the first thing that somebody said when I saw them is they said, "My gosh, this heat's driving me crazy."
It's Canadian. That's who we are.
I know.
We talk about the weather.
We do, yeah. And aren't we blessed to have 4 real seasons?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to fall. When the leaves change, that is beautiful. Yeah. We'll be door knocking, we'll be kicking the leaves down the street.
Yeah. Perfect. And you're probably looking forward to fall after October the 19th.
I am. Although this campaign, I'm really enjoying being at the doors.
Well, that's interesting. This is the first time you've run, right?
Well, no. I did run more than a decade ago.
Oh, did you?
When the Conservative Party was split in two, and there wasn't much winning for either of us on either side. Yeah.
Oh, really?
So just north of here. So it's a riding that no longer exists.
What I hear from politicians often are that this is their favorite time of being a politician, where they can get out and meet people and talk to people in their zone.
Absolutely.
So, it's totally different with having them come to your office because now they're on your territory.
Yes.
But you're now going into their territory and they're more comfortable and you're more uncomfortable, but it's a great way to get to know and understand the issues.
Oh, absolutely. I just never know what will be behind the door. Once I knock on the door and it opens, it could be anything, any question. It could be a compliment, it could be a complaint. I mean, whatever it is, we take it all, and I really do enjoy being able to.
I remember hearing a story of a politician banging on doors, and this politician banged on this door, and the door opened, and it was a grumpy old person there.
As happens.
And they said, "Well, I'm so and so, and I'm running for a member of council for your community." And that individual said, "I'd vote for the devil before I'd vote for you." And he, smart guy. He thought very quickly and reached in his pocket, pulled the pamphlet out, and said, "Well, in case your friend's not running, you might want to consider me."
Excellent. I'll have to keep that
Lots
in
of
mind
funny
in
ones.
case I do bump into that. Yes.
Anyway, Marion, let's get down to the brass tacks of things. In 2008, 2009, and everybody knows, we faced the worst recession and worst economic times since the Great Depression. It was largely, though, the responsibility fell largely on U.S. real estate market, and then that drove consumer confidence down, and nobody bought any cars, and, well, that's a pretty big player in everybody's economy, and so we kind of got dragged into it because we're more or less connected to the hip with the U.S. I think 80% of everything we export goes to the U.S. So this time, though, there is a little setback in the economy. I wouldn't call it major, and I don't, we never want to, tell the people out there, "Oh, it's doom and gloom," because it's really not doom and gloom. It's just kind of a stalling more than anything. But this time it seems to be because of the oil and gas, which is really a different kind of problem for the Canadian economy because largely our currency is kind of, we often call it a petrocurrency because it's kind of driven along fossil fuels. And of course, we don't have a whole lot, like the last recession, we don't really have a whole lot of control over it because OPEC's saying, we're just going to suck the stuff out of the ground. We don't care how much is in reserve. And that's really driving the price down. So what's the next approach?
Well, I do think that continuing on with an innovation policy. We've been talking a lot about that in business, and especially here in this area. We're looking at, for example, high tech in this area. It's a growing industry, and it's something that we need to support. So we are reliant on that sector, but there are other sectors, and they have been doing well. when we look at any other sector in the Canadian economy, they're still moving along. So yes, this is a bit of a setback, but we know that the price of oil is up and down. So we very much need to look at what's happening there and continue to work with our other sectors and encourage especially small business. And I know we're going to talk about that later.
We sure are.
So I'm not going to jump right into that, but
I don't even have to tell everybody because they can read it right away.
And I'm just going to gesture right there and talk about...
It's about small business, but it's a great big sign and a big message.
Absolutely. So we need to continue on the track that we have been going, our low tax policy. We need to continue to make sure that we have a great environment for business to thrive. Because after all, that drives the economy. It's not just oil and gas. Canada is so much more. And so we're going to focus on that and make sure that we continue to grow in those areas.
It's interesting. I had the opportunity with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to go out to the oil sands and have a tour, and it was...
I've never had that opportunity.
You know what? I said to somebody, it's the best education I ever had, ever. It was the most amazing 3 days. You just wouldn't believe it. But what was really interesting was on the plane going from Calgary up to Fort Mac, and there was an older gentleman sitting behind me in the seat. And of course, I like to joke around with people. When I got up when we were getting off the plane, I turned around to him and never talked to him before.
Right.
I just turned around to him and said, "Well, I've had enough of you. I'm getting off this plane." And he kind of laughed and chuckled. He says, "I've been up here in Fort McMurray for 45 years." He said, "I retired up here." And he says, "I look on this plane and I don't see anybody I know." And he said, I can remember. And so I said to him, "Well, you must remember the real fluctuations in oil." He says, "I remember when oil back in I think he said in the late 90s or 80s, it was at $10 a barrel."
Yes, absolutely. There was a period, we've seen it before. We'll likely see it again.
Yeah.
And we know that we can weather the storm with the Canadian people that we have, with their ingenuity and with their innovation.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's unfortunate. Any businesses that are tied to the oil and gas industry are suffering a little bit, but as
right
you
now,
said,
yes.
We have enough diversity, certainly in the Waterloo region anyway.
Absolutely.
That there are other industries that are doing extremely well in spite of the problems with oil and gas. So
yes.
Who knows where it's going to go, but. Anyway, it's no surprise to business, certainly, that our economy has stalled or slipped a little bit because, frankly speaking, lawmakers are walking through the ivory halls of Parliament. Business has been chugging along, not bustling along. So your government has dramatically increased our trade deals with other nations. The big one is, of course, the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement with the European Union.
Absolutely.
However, they're not in the greatest economic shape over there either. And
some are.
Yeah,
not all.
There are some, but largely it's
overall
it's still a market that's very difficult. However, trade agreements are critically important, and the Chamber of Commerce, as you well know, advocates for more and more and more and more trade agreements with other nations. However, there is one trade agreement that's never been solved. And that's the interprovincial trade agreements.
Ah, yes.
And, these poor wineries in Niagara would just love to sell their wine in British Columbia, but the people of Kelowna get mad. But we need to address it. If we can trade freely with foreign nations, why can't we trade freely with our provinces?
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it really does bother me that provinces protect their own territory. They throw up these walls, and we do need to break them down. You're talking about wine. I know. Why can't we, when we're in BC and see a beautiful wine, we're on vacation recently, we do a family out there in Abbotsford, BC, found a wonderful wine, but we can't find it here in the LCBO. We need to be able to do that.
Yeah,
I think provinces need to tear those walls down. You're right. We can trade internationally. Why can't we do that within our own federation? I'm with you there. You won't find any disagreement as far as.
And I think the Prime Minister has made that announcement. He talked about beer, I think it was, and
absolutely
in a recent statement.
Yes,
so.
Yes, let's do that. Oh, great topic. Beer, all those little breweries
beer,
that are
wine.
coming.
Well, we're not talking about just beer and wine, but
no,
they're the highlighted
agree.
ones.
It is, because I think that's what a lot of consumers see. Yeah. That is the one that we see.
Sure, for sure.
Yeah, we couldn't even take wine across the borders until until that was changed recently. Our government did change that.
Mhm.
So that is a good thing.
Well, so at least you can throw it in your trunk and drive it across the country.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you can't
Personally, you can
buy
take.
it there, and that's
I know.
the problem.
I
And there
know.
are some great BC. I'm not knocking the BC wines, but
And
there's
we have-
also some great
We
Niagara
have
ones.
wonderful wineries in this
Yes.
area as well.
Yeah.
But we should be able to enjoy
I
wine from all
I
across
agree.
Canada. So here we are,
We would
stuck
absolutely
on
agree
wine
with
and
you.
beer. Who knew that we would devolve into that immediately on the second question?
I
Yeah.
know. Another issue that's faced small business is the skilled trades issue. Governments like to feed the system with, educational
Apprenticeship
investments.
grants.
Apprenticeship grants, and that's honorable. That's great.
Yeah.
However, when a business needs a person, they can't wait for 2 or 3 years for, someone
For
to
that person
graduate.
to be trained, to
They-
come up through.
and a lot of, and then you get into the red seal trades, which are really, not just the skilled training, but also the experience that comes with that skilled
Yes.
training. Welders are a really good example, like some who can
Yes.
weld anything, but they need the experience of welding some of those difficult metals and
Right.
stainless steel and aluminum, and so
We are talking about interprovincial barriers there as well. To
Oh
go
yes,
back to our
yeah,
first topic,
absolutely.
and-
There's no question about
Yeah,
that.
I have met with welders and we've talked about that. But anyway,
It's very difficult because we need welders, we need steel fabricators,
we do.
we need truck drivers,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people would say truck drivers not a skilled trade. Well, back up a 45-foot trailer to a loading dock. You'll find out really quickly.
I don't want to do it.
No, you
Yes.
find out really quickly. I think you need to have some skill. There's no question about it. However, the temporary foreign worker program
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't seem to be working. I understand where the government situation was. We had a fast food outlets out west who abused it.
Yep.
There's no question about it, and needed to be changed. But we also have companies here who are looking legitimately at trying to bring them in, and they simply can't do it. There's a mountain of paperwork to have to go through. There's a mountain of problems. I actually dealt with one who went through all of the details, and then when he got down to how he marketed for his job opening, he was stalled because he then would have had to spend $40,000 advertising this welding position from coast to coast to coast in all of the major newspapers, and before he could get the government's acknowledgement that there was a need for that individual. Well, he says,
Right.
come and see me. He's the last remaining supplier to Tim Hortons,
Oh, is he?
and they're
So a very
they're building
specialized
a very
welding
specialized
kind of
welding.
skill
Yes,
that-
absolutely.
That he's
So
looking for.
so anyway, I think the temporary foreign worker program isn't
Mm-hmm.
working. We've known this for 15, 20 years. We've been talking that we're going to have this skilled labor shortage. We're going to have to depend on immigrants to fill those voids, and now it's difficult to bring those immigrants in to fill those voids. What can we expect the government to do?
Well, you were talking about temporary foreign workers program, but really we know that that is a program of last resort.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is absolutely no Canadian to fill that spot, that's what the program was there for. And we do know that some companies have abused that. They have pulled people in when there were Canadians looking for work.
Yep.
So that is the way we've reformed it. And as someone who has sat at the table with business talking about skilled trade, talking about temporary foreign workers, I know that the government has listened. And I just want to talk a little bit about the fact that for the last 5 years, I worked as a director of regional affairs under Minister Diane Finley. So we had many roundtables. I've heard these issues. They've sat at the table with Minister Finley and with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the government has listened. We have reformed the temporary foreign workers program. And I know that we're going to go back to employers and we're going to continue talking. And we're going to see what works and what doesn't work. But again, I just want to reiterate that we need to make sure Canadians fill our jobs first.
Yes,
And
no
I know,
question.
as you said,
Yep.
that there are people, there are times when that doesn't happen. And we do need to make sure that they can come in. And that is why, looking at our immigrant program as well, we are looking for specific skilled immigrants. And we have changed that program as well to reflect that. So we're continuing to work on it. I do know that those shortages exist, and part of it happens in the family too. And I know you're talking about government, but why can't we, as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever we might be, talk to kids about what kind of a lucrative, amazing job being a skilled welder can be, instead of always pushing them off into university. Or I don't mean to say pushing them off,
No.
but you know what I mean. Instead of always emphasizing university first,
Yeah.
you know, you may have a child who's so suited for the skilled trades. And I speak from experience. I have 6 boys. I think we've talked about that
Yes,
before.
we have, yeah.
Yes, we have. And 4 of them have gone through university. One is a software engineer. You know, they are in all different fields. But I have one son who loved working with his hands. Now, he initially went to Afghanistan. He's a vet at a very young age, an Afghan vet. But under a government program that is moving soldiers into trades, helmets to hard hats.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so he was able to qualify under that. And he is now working as an apprentice carpenter.
Oh, wow.
And a finishing carpenter. So they do some of the skilled work that you see inside the house. The bookcases, the fireplaces, not just the trim around the doors. But if a builder really needs someone to do something specialized, he's training for that.
Yeah.
So that's why I go back to the family. Parents, we need to talk to our kids.
Oh, we do.
And you know, if you've got a child, a son or a daughter, you know, women in the skilled trades, let's encourage that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hire a plumber today. It costs you $95 an hour.
Exactly.
It's not a bad job, you know. It's in fact a very good job. And we actually, the chamber tried to get into. Remember, you know, when they have grade 8 students go to the school the year before.
Absolutely.
Well, we wanted to go and talk because they always have mom and dad with them. We wanted to be able to get into the local high schools and talk to the parents and the kids and say, you know, you're going to be making decisions over the next few years of where your future is going to lie. Yes, you know, university education, if that's the path that you believe you need to be in or you can be in,
and
then
it's
that's
important for us to encourage education.
Well, we need. You know, somebody said there was a shortage of PhDs, and you know, and we need really highly skilled people, especially in this area.
Absolutely.
However, you know, there's only room for about half of the high school graduates to get into universities.
Yes.
Where do the other half go?
Exactly.
And we need them to start looking at electricians and plumbers and carpenters and you know. Cement workers and
it can be
finishers.
So rewarding to work with your hands and to see what you're doing at the end of the day, to see that accomplishment as you walk away.
Technology is moving all kinds of ways, and you know, we talked a little bit about oil and gas, and our dependency on fossil fuels is diminishing and diminishing and diminishing. But we're always going to need plumbing.
We are.
It's just where it's at. So, you know, if I had to do it all over again, that's what I'd be telling my kids. Be a plumber. They're $95 an hour. My gosh.
Exactly.
Doing business in Ontario is expensive, as you know. Hydro costs are soaring. Businesses are complaining about it every single day. They're talking about it not only outpacing their ability to produce revenue, it's outpacing their ability to produce profits. Carbon tax, a credit system is coming to Ontario. We've had that announcement. The Ontario Retirement Pension Plan is a big bone of contention with small businesses. They just can't. And to tell you the truth, they look at all of these and say, well, wait a minute. You know, take the Ontario Pension Plan, for example, that's being, you know, the small businesses.
Or don't take it.
Small businesses look at that and say, you know what? I know, we understand that people aren't saving the amount of money that they need for retirement. But how does it become our problem to solve? How is it our fault? You know, I had one small business person in here with the minister in a roundtable session say, wait a minute, I pay my employees really, really well. I don't know why it's my fault that they're not saving some of the money that I'm giving them.
And I should have put in a little plug right here for TFSAs, our savings account. Tax-free savings account, which we have increased. And we should be able to all put some money away. You know,
I think there's got to be an inherent responsibility of the individual to do
Absolutely.
Yes. You know, however, that being said, when was the last time that the Canada Pension Plan was looked at? That would avoid, you know, provinces jumping in and creating these massive pension plans that are going to really, you know, most people look at them and say, well, most people in the workforce right now are saying, well, it's not going to benefit me anyway. Most business owners are saying, you're not tackling the issue. The issue is an education issue. It's about financial literacy. It's not about,
Yes.
it's not about, having, big government take care of people. This is an education issue, and it's certainly not our responsibility. And so what is the official Conservative position on the ORPP coming into the province of Ontario, and looking at the Canada Pension Plan?
Well, as far as the ORPP, I've heard that at the doors too. We've talked about being at the doors, and I've met many small business owners. Interesting, such a variety of businesses I've come across, from, a company that takes care of pets while people are on vacation, and high-tech innovation, small startup companies.
Yeah.
So I've seen the range of them, but they have all said to me, can you stop the ORPP? They understand that it's a tax on their payroll. It's a job-killing payroll tax. That really is what it is, as you mentioned. And I'm hearing that almost every day from small business owners at the door. And we are hearing that. The Prime Minister has heard that. Stephen Harper has said publicly that, exactly as I've said, this is another tax on business at a time when businesses can't afford more taxes. You've talked about energy costs as well, and that's another thing that I'm hearing. People are saying, can you do something about Ontario's energy costs? Well, they're actually wording it in a slightly different way and saying, can you get rid of Kathleen Wynne? To be honest, I've heard that a number of times at the door. So this is something that we will definitely stand up against. We have been, and we will continue to do that. We want to support small business and help them get ahead. And this isn't the way to do it.
No. And thus the reason why we've adopted this, and we're going to keep plugging this for years if it takes it. But
I just want to say, Greg, that I really appreciate that the Chamber is doing that. My background is small business. For almost 30 years, my late husband and I started, it actually was two small businesses, two successful businesses that we grew. And I understand 14 hours of work a day.
Yep. Or more.
Or more. Absolutely. It just becomes all consuming. So, yeah, just as a little sidebar there.
Yeah.
I know we have more questions to get to.
The carbon tax system, as I mentioned earlier, is being brought into Ontario. We know that. But your opponents in this election are also proposing a federal model of some sort of carbon tax or credit system. When government taxes for a purpose, it doesn't stop them from shifting the direction of that purpose. Gas tax is a really good example. It was designed to be for transportation, road infrastructure. We all know that gas taxes now go into general revenues. It's really different in the United States. Not that
back to the municipality.
Or back, which is great. Yeah, which is great. It's really different in the United States. The United States has a silo of funds, and they say they're putting gas tax on it. It goes into that silo, and it cannot be used. Not even the President of the United States can say, let's take some of that money and spend it on something else. It must be spent on transportation and road infrastructure. I'd love to see that, because quite frankly, a carbon tax system, what are they going to do with the money to reduce? Nobody says what they're going to do. They just say we're going to tax it, but what initiatives are they going to do
with it?
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that they take money in and then they buy credits from other countries and then say, look what we've done.
Yeah, I've never been able to wrap my head around that either.
No, because the whole purpose should be trying to inspire innovation where we can do what we do every single day and manufacture the things we do and expel less. So that takes innovation, not taxes to do that. It takes innovation.
Absolutely. And I know that our government, the stance has been quite clear over the years that a carbon tax is a job-killing tax as well. So we are going to stay away from that. But innovation, as you said, yes, absolutely. We need to continue to do that. I know there's an innovation strategy in place, and I'm sure you've heard the Prime Minister talk about that. We've had many programs for innovation, and there was one that I just wanted to mention. I've done a little homework here, and it was something that actually Minister Diane Finley spoke to the Chamber about this particular initiative, which is CSIP, and I always have to remember exactly what it is, the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program. You use these initials so often and you forget what it means, but we're looking for companies, businesses that have innovative products, including for greenhouse gases or whatever it may be. And these are companies who need a little help. They have a prototype that they may need some more testing on, or they may want to sell this into foreign markets or Canadian markets. And I've sat at a round table and I've had a business say a number of years ago that they had this product. They were trying to sell it, I think, into the US. And they were saying, what does your government think of it? What does your federal government think? And the business owner had to say, I don't know, because our government hadn't touched it, hadn't wanted to speak with him about it. So what this new program did, it was developed in response to that kind of thing that we were hearing. And the government now will take entrepreneurs who have these wonderful products, maybe a prototype, and use it in a certain government field. It could be, I think there was one here, there's a small company from Quebec. As I said, I did a little homework on this one.
Yeah.
They developed an innovative technology that offered significant fuel savings and lower emissions, and that's why it came to mind. They've attracted considerable private sector interest in their technology, and that was following testing by Parks Canada, parks across Canada. And that is because the federal government was willing to step in under this program, work with the prototype. And that's how we're going to solve these issues. Innovation, government working with business to help business do what they do best.
We know we have a company, an individual in town, young fellow, who has an engineering degree in environment, and he actually built a prototype of an extraction unit that actually takes out the CO2s from the emissions, and then stores it, and actually converts it into the byproduct is actually like a propane type gas for barbecues and vehicles. It's almost a natural gas that comes out of the carbon emissions. So it's little things like that quite frankly will solve the greenhouse gas issue from Canada's perspective, not taxing carbon.
Absolutely.
Certainly that's what business is saying. I get that every single day. Government just keeps piling these costs on us, and you know what? When they talk about tax, they say, oh yeah, the government comes along and says, well, we're going to reduce your tax. Well, that'd be great if I'm making a profit. A lot of small businesses right now are saying, cut the tax, raise the tax, I could care less, I'm not making any money. But piling on these costs that aren't related to the profitability of the company, it becomes like a property tax, which is, we know the most unfair tax.
Right, but one of the things we can do is decrease the amount of red tape that companies struggle with.
Absolutely.
Because we've talked a little bit earlier about coming home after that 14-hour day, then doing the paperwork. I've been there. So when we talked about red tape reduction strategy, the one-on-one strategy, that's one that I'm very fond of. If we're going to put a new regulation in place, we're going to look for an outdated one and take it away and make sure that that burden doesn't get bigger on companies. So that's something that we can do. That was in response to what business told us, small business in particular. We're often talking about the mom and pop businesses. And, frankly, that's what we were too.
Yeah, everybody starts off as a small business. Doesn't matter who you are.
Exactly, working out of your home. And we're talking about making it easier as well for home expenses. That was an announcement the Prime Minister made, I think, last week. On reducing more red tape. And it might just be a small footnote to most people, making sure that when we claim expenses for home offices, streamlining that, making it easier. I know it's a big thing for small business when we've got to sit down and try to figure out what percentage of our home we're using.
I know.
So sometimes things like that may not seem like the biggest announcements in the world, but they're helpful.
Oh, no question about it. Yep, for sure. We've got to stop piling on business because, that goes to the next.
Because they create the jobs here.
Yeah, for sure. No question about it. No question about it. Cost of government is getting out of control. That's what businesses are saying every single day. For crying out loud, they need to pile on more costs onto me. And people are saying the same thing. And nobody will argue it because we found out the other day, 42% of our pay goes to taxes. Almost half of everything an individual earns goes to the a government of some
Well,
level.
the Conservative Party is committed to keeping taxes lower. The federal tax burden is the lowest it's been since Prime Minister Diefenbaker, and we want to continue on that path. We understand how much taxes eat up, and we'd like people who work hard to keep that money in their own
I know,
pocket.
and that's what it's all about. You know,
and that's important to
if-
me as a Conservative candidate.
If you look at the statistics, over the last 50 years, household income has increased by 500%. Taxes have increased by 1,800%. So you don't have to be a mathematician to put that on a graph and figure out
Of course
those
not.
two lines are going to meet someday down the road. I'm not sure when, but they will. And the ability of the government to spend money is going to outweigh the ability of us to provide them with money.
To make the money.
It
Yes.
absolutely has to stop. It
Yeah.
just doesn't. It just doesn't make any sense. And
Well,
your government,
yeah.
your government though, claims to have, but it never seems to make it to the paycheck. It doesn't seem to,
Well,
because
it
if
has
it's
for,
growing, if taxation's growing, how is it? How
Well,
is
here
it
in
that these
Ontario,
cuts are
though, we
working?
have created tax room, but unfortunately, it's been eaten up for a lot of
Well-
us by provincial taxes. So federally, we have been lowering those taxes, but I understand that it's being raised in other areas, so we may not feel it. But again, as I say, as a Conservative candidate, that's really one of my top priorities, keep our taxes low. It's important to me, and I know it's important to our Prime Minister.
Yeah, and it's really important to business owners who are,
Absolutely.
largely business owners. They don't have that pension plan to look forward to at the end of the day. 'Cause-
Yes, when you're self-employed, you don't have a safety net to fall back on.
So they
I
need to,
understand that
they
completely.
need to squeeze the lemon right now and try and stuff
Yes.
some money aside because, a lot of people don't know that, a small business owner who goes out of business doesn't get unemployment insurance either
I know.
because they don't
Yeah.
pay into it.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good
it's,
point.
really, there's not enough appreciation for that person that puts their neck in the guillotine every day and says, I'm rolling all my dice, and
Yeah.
and it's hard.
And
there's
that's
no
why I
question.
really feel that empathy, because I've been there and, we struggled too at times.
Yeah,
There were times we wondered what we're going to do. There was absolutely no money coming in.
yeah,
And where's the safety net? Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
It just doesn't seem to be there. So, Marion, scandals have plagued every single government. There's not one that can claim to be the perfect party. We see right now we have Wallen and Duffy and Brazeau in the news, largely because there's an election on, but this is not unique. Although the NDP don't even have anyone in the Senate, their MPs' expenses have come under question of late to the tune of $2.7 million to
They
some
have.
degree. The NDP, Mr. Mulcair, says that he would like to abolish the Senate. Mr. Harper and the Conservatives say that'd be a great idea, but virtually impossible to do. Mr. Trudeau says he wants to reform the Senate. I don't know whether that means make it functional again. All I do know is Mr. Trudeau has banished the Liberal senators from his caucus. What do you think should be done with the Senate, and how do we get back to honorable elected officials that are respectful of government or the people's money?
Well, that's a very good question. You talked about the different approaches to possibly changing the Senate. I just want to say first that I am very bothered by what's gone on there too. I don't understand. It should be an honorable position, and why to abuse expenses in that way? We do need to make changes, and I know that the government immediately started that investigation, that audit, so that there are other senators as well whose expenses have been questioned and they have paid it back. But that leads to the question of what can we do, what should we do? You talked about the party's positions, and the NDP, when they talk about abolishing it, what about the Constitution? We've got to get into the Constitution then. Every province needs to be on board. We've already had a few provinces saying, wait a minute, Mr. Mulcair, we're not going to go for that, for the abolishing, without a whole lot of discussion. Who knows what else might come up? So it's a bit of a fairy tale for the NDP to say, we can just abolish the Senate. We can't, not just like that. Mr. Trudeau, I think he is talking about a study well, we know what a study does. It just pushes things off into the future. It's easy to say you're going to look into it, you're going to study it. There are concrete things we can do. I really like the idea that the Prime Minister had of term limits. So making sure that each senator could only be in his position or her position for about 8 years. I like that idea.
I kind of like the elected part of it too,
Well,
where,
yes.
because quite frankly, the NDP, while they'll try and abolish it, really what they would like to do is they'd probably like to have NDP senators. If they were elected at the provincial level, Mr. Harper says he would appoint them. They may have some NDP senators.
They may. I like that idea as well, and we have done that. And it is constitutionally possible to elect someone in the province, it's being done in Alberta, and have the Prime Minister appoint him. So I agree with you. That's another good thing that we could be doing, that we should be doing, that the provinces should talk about doing a little more than they have. So I think there are some concrete things that can be done. Yes, I do agree there should be some changes, and we need to make sure that our senators are accountable as well.
I think it's always been known to be the chamber of sober second thought, and that's all fair and good. And I think, to some degree, there's probably some really good thought gone into some legislation that's been put forward by the House and responded to by the Senate. And I think really what we need to do, if we can't get rid of it, and if it doesn't really make sense to get rid of, then we need to make it a core function of democracy in Canada. In some way, we need to figure out how that works. And maybe the elected and the term limits is the appropriate way to go.
Yeah, I think that's a good start.
Yeah. Electoral reform. This comes around every time there's an election, largely because and I understand Ms. May when she talks about, electoral reform and proportional representation. And the NDP from the past, they're still big proponents of it, because largely they had difficulty getting what they perceived to be their fair share of the number of seats in the House. I guess my concern to some degree is if we do go down that path of proportional representation, because Mr. Trudeau has come out and said if he's elected, he will form an all-party committee that will look at electoral reform with a view on proportional representation.
A study.
A study, yes, which we know what happens to studies. They never turn out into anything. But really, it eliminates majority governments. And I'm kind of the old school guy. I hate minority governments because nothing ever gets done. However, that's not to say that proportional representation hasn't been a success in other countries. In some countries it has been. And in fact, Israel, in this last election, got an outright majority in a proportional representation framework. So that's kind of almost remarkable.
That's rare.
Yeah, it's almost remarkable. But it has been a success. What do you think about electoral reform, whether it be proportional representation? The whole purpose of this is to engage people. And, with 57 or 60% of the electorate actually voting, we do need to do something to make sure that a lot more people have a say.
We do. But, it does start, I think, in the homes, with the families. I think parents need to talk to their children and engage them early on. And even civics classes need to continue to go on in elementary schools. I have talked at the doors to parents who said, my children are just a voting age now. We discuss it around the dinner table, and my 2 sons, they will be voting. I've heard that time and time again, the sons or the daughters, because the parents are engaging. So I think that's one piece of the puzzle to make sure young people engage.
So it starts with mom and dad. It starts with mom and dad. It's not unlike any other thing.
Well, that's true.
Right?
That's true, but I do hear when the families engage their children in political discussion. Now, they may not end up voting the same. I've had some discussions at doors where, the parent is voting one way, and there may end up being 2 lawn signs on that lawn before the election is over. Yeah, we've seen that before. That's healthy democracy.
Yeah.
I am a fan of, I support the Westminster system that we have here. It has worked well for us for many, many years. Now, there is the voter engagement, and as I said, there are pieces of the puzzle there that we can work on. But I do appreciate that we do achieve majority governments. You know, with Canada, we talk about peace, order, and good government. That's what Canadians are. It sounds a little bit boring. It's not the exciting slogan other countries may have, but good government, that's what we're all about. That's what we need in Canada. So we have achieved good government
I think,
under the system that we have.
Yeah, and you know, and I think my concern would be that, you know, and I'm not sure whether I'm for it or against it. I really like to see the models and how it would work out. But, you know, if we did go to proportional representation, we'd almost have to make adjustments to or abolish the Westminster system. Because we couldn't have a government fall every 6 months because we'd never have majorities. So we just, you know, people would get sick and tired of voting, and then that would give you voter fatigue. So, you know, I think a lot of thought has to go into this. And there really has to be a challenge to governments at all levels. And how do we engage more voters? You know, municipal is always the very lowest.
Oh, it is.
It has the biggest impact on our everyday lives.
I know.
Nobody understands that. But you know, I think it's important that we do engage. And I agree with you that it does start with at home. You know, all of my kids are engaged before they're even
excellent.
They're before they're even voting age. They're following what's going on. They're talking about it.
Yeah, before they're voting age.
I think this new demographic too, this new, you know, I've got a 13-year-old daughter. She's kind of this, they call them the digital natives. You know, they grew up in a world where there was a computer in just about every room of the house, and TVs were flat and hang from the wall.
Encyclopedias? I know, my youngest son said that too. Doing a project, why didn't you just go to Wikipedia?
Yeah.
I said, we did not have Wikipedia, we had encyclopedia.
No, exactly. I think they're getting engaged, and technology, I think, will make it easier to vote. Someday we'll have online voting for every level of government. So
it's so much easier now to look up information on any candidate. And I know people sometimes say that, you know, my vote doesn't count. But look at this region. Look at Peter Braid's first election. 17 votes was his margin of victory. Every vote counted in that election.
Sure.
If your family and a couple of your neighbors went out, you made the difference in that election.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's a healthy debate. I think we should talk about it because really the objective shouldn't be how do we get more diversity around Parliament. It should be how do we engage more people in the electoral process.
Yeah, you'll find no disagreement here.
Yeah, thank you. I like it when my interviewees don't disagree with me. And then this one, I don't want you to disagree with me either. Finally, our campaign, as you know, is Small Business Too Big to Ignore. 98.2% of all employer businesses in Canada are under 100 employees. 2/3 of all working Canadians work for small business, largely ma-and-pa type firms, and 80% of all the new jobs created come from small business. They're a powerful entity in the economy, probably, I think, the most vital component of our entire economy. And you know, FedDev has a great program here that has helped some small and medium-sized businesses launch new products and get innovative and do some interesting things, but and more...
We are so fortunate to have Gary Goodyear here.
Yes.
At the helm of FedDev.
But more needs to be done. Small business is key in the
always.
I look at it as if I was a gambler, which I'm not a gambler, but if I went into a casino, and I knew there was a slot machine over there that would pay off 80% of the time, I'd be throwing my quarters in that slot machine. And I think that's what government needs to look at. You know, the payoff for small business pays off 80% of the time, where they're going to hire people and create jobs, and that's really what we want to see. That was number 2 in people's concern for this election. The economy number 1, and jobs number 2.
Jobs number 2.
So what will a conservative government do to bolster more small business?
Right. We will continue on the path that we've started, creating that economic climate that's good for small business. Now, you know that I was a small business owner, and so it's very important to me. I understand what it's like to be the owner of that mom and pop small business, to start it from scratch and work all those long hours. And I know that the Conservative government and the Conservative Party, we do understand that. There are things that we have done and will continue to do. Payroll taxes is one. EI premiums. Now, we all know that businesses and employers and employees pay those premiums. There will be a freeze on EI premiums until 2017, and then the rate will actually lower about 20%, so lowering payroll taxes. Also working on red tape reduction. I very much like the rule that if one regulation comes in, one outdated regulation has to go. So that is something that will help small business. Red tape, at the end of the day, we can come home and finish the work and then have to do all of the paperwork that the government needs. So another small one was simplifying. Well, I think it's small because it's not going to be in the headlines, but it's big to mom and pop operations. Simplifying how home business expenses are calculated, home office expenses are calculated. That's an important one as well. I remember struggling with that. So there are some small things that we can do, or things that seem small but that will have a big impact. Lowering the business tax rate for when businesses make a profit, the taxes paid will be lower. And I know that we will never talk about how small businesses are tax scams created by wealthy people. When I heard Mr. Trudeau say that, I had to read it again, I had to hear it again. I don't understand where that's coming from.
I didn't need to hear it twice.
Small business people are coming to me saying, what is that about?
Yeah.
Does Mr. Trudeau think we have millions in offshore accounts? We're barely meeting payroll. We've talked about how it can be hard to turn a profit for some businesses. So that was so disturbing.
Well, we were fortunate. Your interview is post Mr. Trudeau's comments on that, and I was very, very concerned about that too. What a lot of people out there don't realize is the small business owner is the last person to get to pay a check on Friday.
Yes,
and there's many Fridays there was no pay for the small business owner.
I've been there.
Yes, and that a small business owner, when the business has trouble, there's no unemployment insurance for the small business owner. And they largely risk their home and their family's financial security.
Everything.
And, they're not taxed. I'm sure there was a lot of people that wish they were tax havens for a millionaire because they would love to go into small business being a millionaire.
So. Yeah, just to make it a tax avoidance scheme.
I think it's a critical component, and I'm glad to hear your comments. There is one thing I want to clarify, because again, you're fortunate that this interview took place after a lot of it, but there's been some talk about the small business tax cut by the NDP and the small business tax cut by the Conservatives. The Conservatives are going to reduce it from 11 to 9% in 2009 by 2019. The NDP are offering the exact same thing, except my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the NDP's is based on if you hire someone, you'll get the tax credit, where the Conservatives is simply a cut in the tax.
The Conservatives is simply a cut. I've looked at the NDP position, and I understand the same thing that you do with that. So I'm not as conversant with their platform, perhaps, as I am with the Conservative
I understand
one.
If you hire somebody, then you'll get a tax break.
That is my understanding as well. So the Conservative plan is simply a complete, reduction in taxes.
2% reduction in small business tax.
Yes, and we know that we have a plan. We've balanced the budget last year, and that was such wonderful news that we did balance that 1 year ahead of schedule, and we're on track to balance again. But when the NDP, when they talk about their plan, I sometimes wonder about some of these promises that they're making, including to small business. What will happen if all of these other expensive commitments get in the way of that? We just don't know.
Well, you don't need to give small business an incentive to hire people. That's what they're trying to do.
Yes.
They're trying to do more business and hire more people, and
they are.
They love to grow. That's exactly what they do. It's evidenced by the statistics where 80% of all new jobs come from small businesses. They're the ones that are hiring people.
Right. And so we want to create the climate and continue to create the climate so that that's what small business can do.
Yeah.
And I need to thank you again for this initiative.
Oh,
it is
thanks.
A wonderful initiative.
I wish we had buttons that we could have had everybody wear, but we'll get around to it. We'll get around to it because we're never going to let this one lie low. That's for sure. But Marion Gagne, I want to give you this opportunity to speak directly to the constituents of Kitchener South, Hespeler, and tell them why they should vote for you on October the 19th or sooner.
Or sooner. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. In this election, experience matters. It does matter whether you're the leader of a party, someone who's auditioning in this election campaign to be the Prime Minister, or someone who wants to be the Member of Parliament for this new riding. I do have that experience in business. We've talked about my small business background for more than 25 years, so I want to be a champion of small business in this riding and in this region. I also have had recent experience with government as a director of the MRO, which is the regional office for a federal cabinet minister. Now, what that job entailed was working with infrastructure grants and other monies that came into the region. I worked with municipal officials, I worked with MPPs from the governing Liberal Party, as well as our MPs. I was able to work collaboratively to make sure that the best happened for our riding and for our region. I'd like to continue that work. Now, some other experience that I have that people joke about, I've raised 6 sons, and they say, well, that's a great experience, a great way to prepare you for question period. But one of my sons, just getting back onto a little more serious track here, is an Afghanistan vet. And I've spoken at the doors. There are many families who have a relative, a son, a daughter who's been over there. And I'd like to continue championing veterans affairs as well. That's important to me. So as I said, experience does matter in this election campaign. One promise I will make to you, now I'm not going to sit here and make all kinds of promises, but I will make one. I will work hard for you if you give me that chance, if you mark your ballot for me on October 19th or sooner. Thank you.
Marion Gagne, good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank
you. It's going to be
so
another
much.
hot week out there. You're going to have to sweat it out. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
I
but
know. Carry lots of water.
This is Canada. It's either cold or it's hot. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Good luck.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting.
thank you.